What made Roman emperors never worry about the future? You've been living wrong if you haven't learned this from Epictetus. And in the next 3 minutes, you'll understand why Marcus chose silence over arguing. Now imagine this, the stone courtyards of Rome quiet at dawn, a single candle flickering in the emperor's chamber. Outside, the city stirs, merchants call out, soldiers march, senators scheme, but inside, Marcus Aurelius bends over a wax tablet carving words, not for the crowd, but for himself. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. His words are a fortress against chaos. Now picture him not in marble halls, but stepping into today's world. Planes cutting across skies, cities glowing all night, screens buzzing with 1,000 voices. What would happen if this philosopher-emperor rose again, not to lead Rome, but to guide our world? You might not endure the answer, for it would demand more discipline than you have yet practiced. He would see through your distractions, strip away your excuses, and remind you of truths you try to avoid. That comfort has weakened you, that noise has stolen your attention, that greed has chained your societies. His leadership would not soothe, it would sharpen. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. To understand this better, let's go back to an ancient lesson from Marcus Aurelius himself. When he inherited the empire, Rome was beset with famine, floods, wars, and the Great Plague. Yet his first act was not to despair nor to blame the gods. He simply wrote to himself, "If it is endurable, then endure it. Stop complaining." And so you see how he would meet today's world, not with panic, but with endurance, not with slogans, but with example. Section 2. You picture Marcus Aurelius seated at a great wooden table, surrounded not by senators in white togas, but by leaders in suits, generals with maps of battlefields, and scientists warning of pandemics. His gaze is steady, his hands calm. Around him, panic spreads. Voices rise, accusations fly, fear trembles in every corner of the room. Yet Marcus does not rush to speak. He breathes, and the silence itself begins to order the chaos. This is what leadership in crisis would look like if he ruled today. When the Antonine Plague swept through Rome, killing millions, Marcus did not flee the capital. He stayed among his people, tending to the sick, funding doctors, and even selling palace treasures to provide relief. Imagine such a choice in our own time, a leader who would not abandon the city at its darkest hour, but walk through hospitals and shelters with humility. His words in Meditations remind you, do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good. He saw crisis not as an excuse for despair, but as a summons to virtue. Now you reflect on how our world has faced recent crises. Pandemics froze cities, economies trembled, wars erupted, and leaders stumbled between division and denial. What would Marcus have done? He would have confronted fear with composure, reminding you that suffering is not new. He would say what he once told himself in war, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Obstacles, he believed, were not reasons to give up. They were the raw material of strength. Scholars still debate whether Stoicism in leadership risks coldness, whether too much composure seems like detachment from human pain. Yet Marcus's life disproves this. He was not detached. He wept for his children lost to illness. He labored night after night over decisions that bore the weight of millions. His stoicism did not make him less human. It made him more steady in his humanity. You imagine him now guiding nations through pandemics. He would cut through the shouting and say, focus not on what cannot be changed, but on what can. Wash your hands, care for the sick, live simply, endure with courage. No grand speeches, no false promises, only calm reminders that virtue is within reach, even in catastrophe. And when war breaks, when nations tremble, he would not be quick to rage. He spent much of his reign in military camps, yet he hated war. He called it a duty, never a glory. His lessons to himself still sting today. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. In crisis, he would not only command, he would embody. So you begin to see the difference. In our world, crises often reveal the weakness of leaders, their hunger for applause, their fear of blame. But if Marcus Aurelius stood among us, his leadership would be a mirror showing you that courage is possible, that virtue is practical, that discipline is stronger than fear. You might not like his silence, for it would expose your own noise. Yet you would feel his presence like stone beneath your feet, steady, enduring, unshaken. Section 3. You watch the world around you, pulse with noise, screens glow, voices argue messages, ping the feed, never sleeps. Every second, something demands your eyes, your mind, your energy. You wonder what Marcus Aurelius would do in such an age of distraction. You already know, because he warned himself centuries ago. You become what you give your attention to. If that was true in Rome's busy streets and loud arenas, how much more is it true when you carry the whole world's noise in your pocket? Picture Marcus in a modern city. The traffic roars, billboards flash, phones buzz in every hand. He would not curse the noise. He would not run away to the mountains. He would simply practice the same discipline he carried through his reign to guard his mind as carefully as he guarded Rome's frontiers. In his tent on the battlefield, he carved reminders into his journal: focus on what depends on you, ignore what does not. That same practice would guide him through the endless storm of digital distraction. You reflect on your own habits. How often do you mean to look at one message only to lose an hour in scrolling? How often does the noise of the world bleed into your quietest moments, leaving you restless? Marcus would call this slavery of the mind. He would remind you that freedom is not found in doing whatever you please, but in mastering what you allow into your soul. Scholars still debate whether Stoicism encourages withdrawal from society or disciplined engagement with it. Should you abandon devices entirely or learn to use them wisely? Marcus leaned toward discipline. He did not abandon Rome's chaos. He ruled within it, writing to himself daily so as not to be swallowed by it. He would say the same now: do not run from distraction, but meet it with vigilance. You recall how Marcus often wrote of returning to the present moment, refusing to be dragged by the past or carried away by dreams of the future. He told himself, confine yourself to the present. This is the same medicine you need in an age where your thoughts are stolen by notifications. His leadership today would not abolish technology, but it would demand you master your attention. Imagine him leading nations in the digital age. Instead of drowning in social media wars, he would use tools, sparingly speaking with clarity, then retreating into silence. He would not chase applause or bend to algorithms. His example would show leaders that restraint is stronger than noise, that wisdom is louder than endless talk. And so you sense the lesson for yourself. You cannot silence the world, but you can silence its grip on you. You hold the device, but you do not let it hold you. You live among noise, but you protect the citadel of your mind. This is what Marcus would have done if he walked among us. This is what you can begin to do now. Section 4. You see the towers of wealth rising around you, glass skyscrapers, gleaming markets, buzzing fortunes, rising and collapsing in the span of hours. Corporations shape nations, money flows like a river, and corruption clings like shadow. If Marcus Aurelius stood here today, what would he say to such a world? He already whispered the answer to himself long ago. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Imagine Marcus in Rome's palaces where gold spilled from tables, where senators schemed for bribes, where generals enriched themselves through conquest. He sat as emperor, holding more wealth and power than any man alive. And yet in his meditations, he stripped it all away with his pen-dust illusion vanity. He reminded himself daily that riches could not shield him from plague nor power from grief. His children still died, his body still aged, his heart still ached. To him, greed was not only vice, it was blindness. Now picture him in our age watching corporate empires bend governments, watching politicians hoard wealth while citizens starve, watching greed burn forests and poison seas. He would not be surprised. Rome, too, had its corruption, its betrayals, its endless hunger. But he would remind you that leadership corrupted by greed is leadership already lost. He would stand as he once did, selling treasures of the palace to aid Rome during the plague, giving up luxury so others might survive. Could you imagine such humility from leaders today? You reflect on your own relationship with wealth. How often do you measure worth by income, possessions, or status? Marcus would gently remind you that none of these endure. The richest merchant in Rome lies in the same earth as the poorest slave. Scholars still debate whether Stoicism requires renouncing wealth entirely. Some argue it asks for poverty, others say it allows wealth if used wisely. Marcus himself chose the middle path. He accepted riches as tools, never as masters. You recall his warning. The things you think about determine the quality of your mind. If your thoughts circle endlessly around money, you become its prisoner no matter how much or little you possess. But if you see wealth as indifferent, as something neither good nor evil, then you are free. His leadership today would not abolish wealth, but it would demand justice, fair laws, honest trade, and a constant reminder that greed destroys nations from within. Imagine him addressing corporate leaders today. He would not flatter them nor condemn them blindly. He would simply ask, "Does this profit serve the common good or only your vanity?" His gaze would cut through their excuses, for he once held the entire empire in his hands and still reminded himself he owned nothing. And so you feel his presence even now. The skyscrapers may gleam, the markets may roar, but his words fall like a steady hammer. Wealth is illusion if not guided by virtue. Power is corruption if not balanced with justice. Your task, whether ruler or citizen, is not to crave more, but to master yourself. Section 5. You walk into a courtroom of today, judges in robes, lawyers trading arguments, citizens watching the spectacle unfold. Justice is spoken of as fairness, yet you know how often favoritism, wealth, and power bend its path. Now imagine Marcus Aurelius seated at the bench, not as emperor cloaked in authority, but as philosopher reminding himself, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. His presence alone would demand a justice free from bias, a law grounded not in privilege, but in virtue. Marcus lived in a Rome filled with corruption, where bribes could buy verdicts, and senators often bent laws for their allies. Yet history records that he worked tirelessly to keep his rule free from favoritism. When famine struck, he distributed grain to all, not only the noble. When conspiracies erupted, he punished with restraint, seeking mercy where cruelty was expected. His devotion to fairness was not naive. It was deliberate discipline, the Stoic refusal to let anger or desire twist judgment. You reflect on what that would mean in our world. Leaders today speak of justice but often yield to lobbyists, corporations, and partisan voices. Marcus would have none of it. He would see the law as sacred, not because it serves power, but because it serves people. In his reign, he reminded himself constantly, what injures the hive injures the bee. Justice to him was inseparable from community. If one citizen suffers under corruption, all are weakened. Scholars debate whether Stoicism supports universal equality. Rome was built on hierarchy, yet Marcus's writings constantly return to the shared humanity of all. He wrote that even a slave is part of the same cosmic reason that all are citizens of one universe. Would he abolish inequality entirely if he ruled today? Perhaps not in structure, but in spirit. He would demand laws that treat all as part of the same body. You recall times when you witnessed unfairness, when the wealthy or powerful seemed to glide past rules that bound everyone else. Rage rises in you, but Marcus would urge composure, not because injustice is acceptable, but because only calm discipline can correct it. He would tell you, act justly yourself no matter what others do. To lose your virtue in anger is to surrender justice twice. Imagine Marcus standing in front of modern governments, watching debates descend into insults and manipulation. He would not shout nor trade blows of rhetoric. He would pause, listen, and then remind them, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Silence followed by action. This was his law, and it would be his justice today. And so you see the vision more clearly. Justice is not a courtroom performance, not the privilege of the powerful, but the practice of daily fairness. If Marcus led our world, favoritism would wither under his gaze, and justice would no longer bend to wealth or status. It would bend only toward virtue as it always should. Section 6. You step into a world trembling under storms, forests, burning seas rising, and cities choking with smoke. Climate change presses like a shadow over every nation, and you wonder what Marcus Aurelius would do if he led us now. In his meditations, he reminded himself, what is not good for the hive is not good for the bee. This simple truth would guide his hand in facing the greatest challenge of our age, the health of the planet itself. Marcus was not blind to nature. As emperor, he spent much of his reign not in marble palaces, but in military camps, along rivers, forests, and mountains. He lived in the mud with soldiers watching the rhythms of the earth closely. He wrote often about nature's laws, urging himself to live in harmony with them. Imagine him now standing before leaders who delay climate action for profit. His patience would end, for he knew that to ignore nature's balance is to invite collapse. You reflect on how Stoicism views nature not as a backdrop, but as a teacher. The Stoics believed the universe was ordered by logos, reason woven through all things. To live well was to live according to that order. Today, humanity has broken from it, consuming recklessly, forgetting that the earth is not ours to waste. Marcus would have seen this as a failure of virtue, a refusal of responsibility. Scholars debate whether ancient Stoics could have imagined global environmental crises. Rome exploited its lands too, cutting forests, expanding cities, draining resources. Yet Marcus, facing famine and plague, knew that human survival is fragile. His response was humility, not conquest. If he led today, he would frame climate responsibility, not as politics, but as duty. Each action must serve the hive, or all bees perish. You recall your own habits. Perhaps you waste, consume, and ignore, telling yourself your part is too small to matter. Marcus would whisper otherwise. He would remind you that every choice is a thread in the web of fate. To live without regard for the earth is to live against yourself. That which is not good for the swarm, he would repeat, is not good for the bee. Imagine him addressing a world summit. He would not shout nor accuse, but he would speak with quiet force, live simply, waste less, act with justice toward nature. His own life showed it. An emperor who often wore plain clothes, who endured harsh winters without indulgence, who sold palace treasures to meet the needs of his people. If he could do this with an empire at his feet, could you not do it with a single life in your hands? And so you see the truth sharpen. If Marcus ruled today, climate action would not be a debate. It would be a moral command. To harm nature is to harm yourself. To waste is to betray future generations. His Stoic vision would remind you that the earth does not belong to you. It holds you, sustains you, and in return demands your discipline and respect. Section 7. You hold a device glowing in your hand, and behind it lies the vast machinery of technology, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, space exploration. Humanity now shapes tools that even emperors could not imagine. What would Marcus Aurelius think if he were here to lead? He once wrote, "Does what happened keep you from acting with justice, generosity, self-control, sanity, prudence, honesty, humility, straightforwardness?" His question still echoes. For him, the problem was never the tool, but the soul that wields it. Marcus himself lived in an age of invention roads, stretching across empires, aqueducts, carrying rivers through stone armies, using new machines of war. Yet he never praised the tool for its own sake. He measured it by whether it served virtue. If it built justice, it was good. If it deepened vanity, greed, or cruelty, it was poison. Imagine him now facing debates over artificial intelligence, genetic modification, or the ethics of surveillance. He would not fear the tools themselves. He would fear what happens when humans chase power without restraint. You reflect on how often progress is measured only by speed, how fast, how much, how far. But Marcus would ask instead, how wisely he would remind you that the dignity of humanity lies not in what it can create, but in how it uses creation. Technology without virtue, he would warn, is nothing but a sharper sword in the hand of a reckless child. Scholars still wrestle with this question. Does Stoicism encourage embracing progress or retreating from it? Some suggest Stoics would turn away from modern machines seeking simplicity. Others argue Stoics would embrace them if they served reason and justice. Marcus's life leans toward the second. He did not reject Rome's systems. He used them cautiously, bending them toward duty. You picture him today listening to scientists, ethicists, engineers. He would ask first, not what can this do, but what should it do? He would seek limits rooted in wisdom, not greed. When faced with the power to alter life, he would demand restraint. When faced with the lure of endless consumption, he would demand simplicity. And always he would return to the principle he carved into his soul, to act in harmony with reason, with nature, with justice. You recall moments when you marveled at technology, when a device solved a problem instantly, when a discovery opened new worlds. But you also recall the unease, the pull of distraction, the danger of dependence, the risk of losing what makes you human. Marcus would not tell you to abandon your tools. He would tell you to master them, just as he urged you to master your own mind. Imagine his words addressing this age. The tool is indifferent. The use determines its value. Let not your machines make you less human, but more. In that reminder, you feel clarity. You see that technology is not destiny, it is choice. And under Marcus's guidance, those choices would be disciplined, just, and humane. Section 8. You look across the world and see the gulf between lives. Some dine in excess, while others starve. Some build towers of wealth, while others sleep in the streets. Global inequality hangs like a wound across nations. If Marcus Aurelius were here to lead, how would he respond? His answer is already written in his Meditations. As you are yourself a fragment torn from nature, so also is every part of you a fragment. You were born for fellowship. Either teach them better or bear with them. Marcus believed in the shared humanity of all people. Though he sat on Rome's throne, he reminded himself daily that he was not separate from the beggar in the streets or the soldier in the mud. During the Antonine Plague, he did not seal himself away. He sold treasures from the imperial palace to fund aid, showing that the emperor's duty was to all citizens, not only the wealthy few. Imagine him today confronted with global poverty and refugee crises. He would not see numbers. He would see faces, each one a fellow fragment of nature deserving dignity. You reflect on how easily compassion is lost in modern life. The images of suffering appear in your feed, and after a moment's sadness, you scroll on. But Marcus would stop you here. He would remind you that ignoring another's suffering weakens you because humanity is one body. To let part of the body suffer is to wound the whole. Scholars debate whether Stoicism promotes compassion or cold endurance. Some accuse Stoics of detachment, of refusing to feel. Yet Marcus proves otherwise. His writings often return to the duty of kindness, the practice of justice, the refusal to treat others as tools. His compassion was not sentimental, it was active. He endured his own suffering, yes, but he also sought to ease the suffering of others. Imagine him addressing global inequality today. He would not call for luxury taxes out of vengeance, nor denounce the wealthy as enemies. He would remind them of their duty. Just as a hand must serve the body, those with resources must serve the whole. Wealth without service, he would say, is disease. And to leaders who ignore the poor, he would give no comfort. He would look at them steadily and whisper, "You forget that you too are mortal. You will die as quickly as the one you neglect. You recall times when you gave and times when you turned away. The giving left you lighter, freer, while the turning away left a quiet heaviness inside." Marcus would say that heaviness is nature's reminder that you are meant for fellowship, that compassion is not weakness, but alignment with the universe. Picture him walking through modern refugee camps or slums or hospitals in forgotten corners of the world. He would not offer speeches of pity. He would roll up his sleeves as he once did in plague-ridden Rome and simply serve. His leadership would remind you that to care for others is not charity, but justice, not kindness, but duty. And so you see what would happen if Marcus ruled today. The lines between rich and poor would not vanish, but they would no longer define dignity. He would build a world where the measure of leadership is not wealth hoarded, but humanity shared. Section 9. You hear the rumble of conflict drones in the sky, missiles striking cities, nations locked in endless rivalry. The modern world trembles under the threat of war as much as Rome once did. Marcus Aurelius spent much of his reign in military camps, not palaces, leading soldiers along the empire's northern frontier. Yet his writings reveal not a man of glory, but of weariness. It is possible to be a man of perfect virtue even in a palace, he wrote, reminding himself that power must never corrupt purpose. If he stood here today, how would he approach war and peace? Marcus knew war intimately. He slept in tents, ate soldiers' rations, and endured brutal winters. Unlike many rulers, he did not glorify conquest. War to him was duty, a last resort, not ambition. Imagine him now watching nations rattle their weapons. He would remind them war should never be entertainment, never be used to inflate egos, never be pursued for gain. He would say, as he told himself often, "The best way of avenging yourself is not to become like the wrongdoer." You reflect on your own world, where outrage fuels battles, where leaders treat victory as spectacle. Marcus would not deny the need for defense. Rome itself would not have survived without it, but he would insist on restraint. He would march to war only with heavy heart, and he would demand mercy even in victory. During his reign, when enemies were defeated, he often sought to integrate them into the empire, rather than slaughter them. He knew that hatred breeds only more hatred. Scholars debate whether Stoicism leads to pacifism or disciplined strength. Some argue Stoics reject violence, while others believe they accept it as necessity. Marcus himself seems to stand between unwilling to glorify war, unwilling also to abandon duty. His philosophy reminds you that courage and compassion can coexist, that strength must be tempered with justice. You recall times when you felt the pull of vengeance, when anger tempted you to strike back. Yet when you resisted, when you chose restraint, the result left you lighter, stronger. Marcus practiced this discipline on the scale of empires. If he led today, he would urge leaders to master themselves before mastering armies. To win without virtue, he would say, is to lose twice. Imagine him at peace summits listening to rival nations argue. He would not interrupt with fury. He would wait, let the noise pass, and then speak simply. Every man you call enemy will die just as you will. Why then spend your brief time sowing destruction? His calm would cut deeper than any threat. And so you begin to see if Marcus Aurelius led our world wars would not vanish, but they would be guided by restraint. Peace would not be weakness, but the highest discipline. His example would teach that true strength is not domination, but the mastery of anger, the refusal to become like the enemy you face. Section 10. You walk into a modern classroom, screens, glowing students, restless lessons reduced to facts and tests. Knowledge is abundant, yet wisdom feels absent. Now imagine Marcus Aurelius shaping education today. He would not dismiss science, mathematics, or technology, but he would remind you that without virtue, information is hollow. His meditations are proof, a book not of laws or politics, but of reminders to live justly, humbly, and with courage. The object of life, he wrote, is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane. Marcus himself was trained in philosophy from youth, studying under tutors who taught him not only rhetoric, but how to govern his soul. His reign showed the fruit of that training, an emperor who valued restraint, who questioned himself, who wrote nightly about self-discipline. If he stood here today, he would not see education as merely preparing workers for markets. He would see it as preparing souls for life. You reflect on how your own schooling often measured you by scores, rankings, and credentials. Yet rarely did it teach you how to face grief, how to master anger, how to act with justice. Marcus would see this as a grave error. He would remind you that a world filled with knowledge but lacking virtue is more dangerous than ignorance. An untrained mind can harm only a little, but an untrained soul with great knowledge can destroy nations. Scholars still debate the role of philosophy in education. Should schools teach virtue explicitly or leave it to religion and family? Marcus would answer with his life philosophy is not luxury, but necessity. Rome survived not by roads alone, but by leaders who carried discipline in their hearts. He would insist that education without philosophy is like training soldiers without shields, skilled but unprotected. Imagine Marcus reforming schools today. Alongside science and history, he would require daily reflection. Journals like his meditations would be encouraged not for grades, but for self-examination. Teachers would speak less of success, more of character. Students would not only memorize what others have said, but practice how to live rightly themselves. He would remind you that wisdom is not taught in words alone, but in the example of those who guide you. You recall moments when you learned not from books, but from someone's integrity, patience, or courage. Those lessons stay longer than formulas or dates. Marcus would build education upon such lessons, weaving virtue into every subject. He would ask of every school, does this make the student not only cleverer, but better? So you see clearly now. If Marcus Aurelius shaped our classrooms, knowledge would remain important, but wisdom would be supreme. The goal would not be producing workers or consumers, but producing citizens of the world's souls, trained to endure hardship, to resist corruption, to act with justice. In this vision, education would not end at graduation, for reflection would be a lifelong duty. And under his guidance, perhaps the world itself would grow less restless, more rooted in the simple discipline of living well. Section 11. You walk into a crowded hospital waiting room, faces weary bodies, frail minds restless. In today's world, medicine can prolong life, but the crisis of health is not only in the body, it is in the soul. What would Marcus Aurelius do if he were to lead here, he once wrote. Because your own strength is unequal to the task, do not assume it is beyond the powers of man. But if anything is within the powers of man, believe that it is within your own compass also. His words remind you that healing is not only treatment, but resilience, a discipline of body and mind together. Marcus himself knew illness intimately. The Antonine Plague swept through his empire, killing millions, perhaps even taking his co-emperor, Lucius Verus. Marcus did not hide in luxury. He worked beside physicians, distributed aid, and sold treasures from the palace to fund relief. He accepted suffering as part of life, yet he did not surrender to it. He treated health not as a guarantee, but as a gift to be tended with simplicity. Imagine him today walking through modern hospitals, urging both patients and doctors alike to see health not only as survival, but as the harmony of body, reason, and soul. You reflect on your own relationship with health. Perhaps you chase diets, supplements, or appearances. Perhaps you neglect your body while drowning in stress. Marcus would remind you the goal is not perfection of form, but endurance in virtue. He would say what he practiced himself: tend your body as a servant, not a master. Eat simply, rest when needed, train yourself with discipline. The emperor who wore plain cloaks, who endured cold campaigns in the frontier, would scorn obsession with luxury while praising quiet resilience. Scholars debate whether Stoicism truly addresses mental health. Some argue it suppresses emotion, others that it offers deep stability. Yet Marcus's own writings reveal a man battling grief, exhaustion, and doubt, using philosophy as medicine for his mind. He admitted his sorrows, but he did not let them rule him. His meditations are proof that Stoicism is not the denial of pain, but the training to bear it well. Imagine him now guiding modern nations. He would expand medicine not only as treatment, but as prevention. He would remind you that a society obsessed with consumption breeds illness, that mental restlessness is as dangerous as physical disease. He would not dismiss therapy or modern science, but he would root them in the same principle: strengthen the soul alongside the body. You remember moments when your body faltered or your mind grew heavy. Perhaps you cursed the weakness or envied those stronger than you. Marcus would ask you instead to accept it as nature, to use hardship as practice. He endured the death of children, the weariness of war, and still wrote, "You have power over your mind." That was his medicine: discipline, acceptance, courage. So you see the truth unfold. If Marcus Aurelius shaped health today, hospitals would remain vital, but wisdom would stand beside medicine. Doctors would heal bodies, philosophers would tend souls, and patients would be reminded that life is not guaranteed, but always enough if lived with virtue. Under his hand, health would no longer mean only the absence of disease, but the presence of strength, balance, and calm endurance. Section 12. You step into a shopping mall or scroll through an online store, and the flood of choices overwhelms you. Every shelf sparkles with newness. Every advertisement whispers that happiness waits behind the next purchase. This is the rhythm of modern consumerism, a rhythm of endless hunger. If Marcus Aurelius led our world today, he would look at this frenzy with quiet sorrow. He once wrote, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind." And he knew that if your mind is chained to possessions, your soul becomes poor no matter how much you own. Marcus himself lived surrounded by wealth. As emperor, he could summon gold jewels, banquets, and entertainment at will. Yet his writings show disdain for luxury. He wore simple cloaks, preferred plain food, and reminded himself that the body needs little to survive. During famine, he sold palace treasures to fund relief, teaching Rome by example that abundance means nothing if it does not serve virtue. Imagine him today walking through endless malls or scrolling through endless feeds. He would remind you that none of this is real wealth, it is distraction dressed as necessity. You reflect on your own habits. Perhaps you've chased something, a new gadget, a new outfit, believing it would finally satisfy. And perhaps you discovered soon after that the joy faded, quickly replaced by a hunger for more. Marcus would call this slavery of desire. He would remind you that true freedom is not owning more, but needing less. Scholars still debate how far Stoicism demands simplicity. Some argue for asceticism, others for moderation. Marcus's own life leans toward moderation. He did not abandon wealth entirely, but he lived as if ready to lose it all. His journals are filled with reminders of death and decay. Gold will tarnish, silk will fray, palaces will crumble. If you tie your soul to them, you fall when they fall. Imagine him addressing modern culture flooded with advertisements and influencers flaunting luxury. He would not rage against them. He would simply expose the illusion. He would ask, does this thing make you better, kinder, more just? If the answer is no, then it is worthless to the soul. His leadership would cut through consumerism not with laws alone, but with example living, simply showing that joy is not bought, but practiced. You recall the times when simplicity brought you peace, a quiet walk, a simple meal, an evening without noise. In those moments, you felt more alive than in the hours spent chasing possessions. Marcus would say that this is the wealth you are meant to cultivate. The less you need, the freer you become. So you begin to see the transformation. If Marcus Aurelius led today, consumerism would wither in the shadow of his discipline. He would remind you that every purchase is a choice not of objects, but of values. And he would guide you back to the truth he carved into his own life, that happiness is found not in what you gather, but in what you are willing to live without. Section 13. You look at the headlines of today, debates about rights, freedoms, laws, and their limits. Some demand liberty without restraint, others call for restrictions in the name of order. If Marcus Aurelius were here, how would he respond? His meditations offer a clue. A man's worth is measured by the objects of his attention. To him, freedom was never the ability to do anything at all. Freedom was the mastery of self, the ability to choose virtue over impulse, duty over desire. Marcus lived as emperor with nearly absolute power, yet he restrained himself constantly. He wrote reminders to avoid vanity, to resist anger, to act with justice even when none could oppose him. His reign showed that liberty without self-control leads to tyranny, but liberty guided by discipline becomes strength. Imagine him in today's world, where freedom is often mistaken for indulgence. He would remind you that rights are balanced by responsibility, and without that balance, both individual and society collapse. You reflect on your own use of freedom. Perhaps you've chased pleasure recklessly, defended your choices fiercely, yet later felt emptiness. Marcus would say that freedom without virtue is simply slavery to passion. The Stoic vision of liberty is not endless choice, but clarity to do what reason and nature demand. Scholars debate whether Stoicism leans too much toward duty, whether it sacrifices individuality. Some argue that its focus on order stifles creativity, while others see in it the only safeguard against chaos. Marcus himself seems to bridge the two. He valued the unique spark of each person, but only when aligned with the common good. What injures the hive injures the bee, he reminded himself constantly. Imagine him addressing nations torn by division over freedom and law. He would not flatter either side. He would remind the people that rights without discipline collapse into chaos, and discipline without compassion collapses into oppression. The balance, he would say, lies in harmony with nature, freedom to pursue what is just, restraint from what corrupts. You recall times when you resisted limits, insisting on your independence. And you recall the relief when you chose self-restraint instead, the clarity, the strength, the quiet dignity of mastery. Marcus would call that the true taste of freedom. He would say the freer you are from desire, the freer you are in life. So you begin to see what his rule would bring. Laws would be written not only to protect liberty, but to demand responsibility. Citizens would not be urged to take everything they could, but to give what they must. And freedom would no longer be the license to consume, but the discipline to live in virtue. Under Marcus Aurelius, liberty would not be destroyed. It would be refined, purified, and raised to its true purpose, the building of a just and enduring world. Section 14. You picture a leader today stepping out of a limousine, cameras flashing, entourages surrounding them. Power is often displayed through luxury suits tailored to perfection, speeches written for applause, lives shielded from ordinary struggle. Now imagine Marcus Aurelius in that place. He once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." And this was not philosophy only in words. It was philosophy lived in action. His greatest authority came not from proclamations, but from the quiet force of personal example. Marcus held the empire's treasures, yet he chose simplicity. During famine, he sold golden ornaments from the palace to fund grain for the people. During plague, he walked among the sick, rather than hiding in luxury. On campaign, he wore plain cloaks and shared hardships with his soldiers. His life showed that leadership is not domination, but service, not display, but humility. Imagine him today, refusing limousines, walking instead, among citizens, choosing modest clothes, listening more than speaking. His very presence would shame vanity and inspire dignity. You reflect on the leaders you have seen, some living extravagantly, while their people suffer, others cloaked in humility, but hollow in deed. Marcus's example cuts through both illusions. He would remind you that authority rests on integrity, not appearances. The emperor, who wrote nightly about his own flaws, knew that leading others begins with ruling oneself. Scholars debate whether virtue can truly inspire nations, or whether people always crave spectacle. Marcus seemed to believe it could. His reign was not free of hardship. Wars, famine, and plague tested Rome relentlessly, yet his people remembered him as one of the last good emperors. Why? Because his conduct matched his philosophy. Even those who disagreed with his decisions could not deny the sincerity of his life. Imagine him standing before cameras today. He would not thunder with rhetoric. He would speak softly, reminding you that leadership is example. He would say less about promises, more about personal discipline. And in an age where hypocrisy is exposed instantly, his authenticity would shine brighter than any speech. You recall moments when you followed someone not because of their words, but because of their example, someone who showed patience in difficulty, honesty when tempted, courage when afraid. Marcus would call this the true power of a leader, not commanding loyalty, but earning it through consistent virtue. So you see how his rule today would reshape leadership. The trappings of power would fade, replaced by the strength of character. Luxury would no longer impress. Humility would. And the greatest reform would come not from new laws, but from a leader who lived so clearly by his own teachings that others could not help but follow. If Marcus Aurelius stood among us, his power would not be in spectacle. It would be in the quiet, unshakable force of example. Section 15. You imagine a world slowly transformed under the guidance of Marcus Aurelius. At first, his leadership feels unusual, less shouting, less spectacle, more silence, more reflection. But over time, you notice the changes. Cities once driven by greed begin to value moderation. Leaders who once chased vanity start imitating his humility. Citizens inspired by his composure find courage in their own lives. This is the Stoic world you could build if his wisdom guided humanity today. Marcus reminded himself daily, the universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it. He would remind you now that a world is shaped not only by policies and armies, but by the collective discipline of minds. If he led today, he would not promise utopia. He would promise struggle against distraction, greed, corruption, and fear. And yet through that struggle, he would show you that peace is possible, because peace is built within. You reflect on how societies crumble when citizens seek only comfort, and how they endure when citizens practice virtue. Marcus lived this truth. His empire was battered by plague, war, and betrayal, yet his steady discipline kept Rome from collapse. If his teachings became the foundation of today's world, crises would not vanish, but they would no longer rule you. Fear would lose its grip, for you would learn endurance. Anger would weaken, for you would learn restraint. Desire would soften, for you would learn contentment. Scholars still debate whether Stoicism can shape societies or whether it belongs only to individuals. Some argue it is too private, too inward. Yet Marcus's reign proves otherwise. The meditations of one man became the stability of millions. His personal discipline radiated outward, guiding soldiers, citizens, and senators alike. Imagine that same discipline extended across nations, millions, practicing restraint, compassion, and courage. The world itself would be steadier. You recall your own journey through these reflections, how each lesson pressed against your habits. To guard attention, to live simply, to act justly, to lead by example. These are not distant philosophies. They are choices you can make each day. Marcus would say, do not expect Plato's ideal state. Be content with small steps forward, and you will see great change. The Stoic world is built not in one stroke, but in daily practice. So you see what would happen if Marcus Aurelius led our world today. The noise would quiet. The greed would soften. The crises would still come, but they would be met with dignity. And slowly, you would find yourself part of a humanity less frantic, more disciplined, more at peace with nature and with itself. A world not perfect, but better. A world not without suffering, but stronger in facing it. A world guided not by vanity, but by wisdom. The vision now fades, and you are left with the gentle echo of Marcus's words across centuries. The marble of Rome dissolves into the glow of your own room, yet his presence remains. You hear again the scratch of his pen on parchment, the quiet reminder he gave himself when the empire shook, that peace lies not outside, but within. You breathe slowly, letting the lessons settle. The noise of modern life still hums around you, notifications, obligations, demands, but you see them differently now. They are no longer masters, only passing shadows. You remember Marcus's calm, his willingness to endure, his refusal to be consumed by what he could not control. And you realize that you too can practice the same. Imagine a world shaped by that discipline, not only under his rule, but through your choices. Each time you act with restraint, you add to that world. Each time you refuse greed or quiet your anger or live simply, you carry forward his legacy. The Stoic world begins not in palaces, but in your own soul. So let the day slow now. Let your thoughts soften into stillness. Picture the candlelight of Marcus's chamber, the emperor writing alone, reminding himself of truths you also need to hear: that you will die, that you must live with virtue, that peace is already within reach if you choose it. Carry that vision with you as you rest. And remember, if Marcus Aurelius were here to lead the world today, his greatest command would not be laws or decrees. It would be the same whisper he gave himself: live well, live, justly live with courage. The world follows where the soul leads.